scheme. So we're hoping to have a really good discussion this afternoon with the great panelists that we have here. My name is Jennifer Brennan. I'm a director at Harlow Consulting, and we're working with Carbon Co-op at the moment to evaluate the impacts of this scheme. Really interesting pilot scheme that's still going on, so we're learning a huge amount as we go, and looking forward to sharing some of those emerging findings this afternoon. I'm going to hand over in a moment, both first to Jonathan, who's going to kindly give an overview of the scheme, and then more widely for introductions. But just before I do that, a little bit of housekeeping. So you'll notice that you've been added to the webinar as a participant, so we don't see cameras. You're all added on mute. So the way to ask questions, you will see in the bottom right hand corner of your screen a little icon that has a triangle, a square and a circle all together. So if you click on that, the bottom option will take you to the Q&A page, and you can submit any questions there as we go through. You have the option to post anonymously or give your name. My colleague Joel, who is on the call, will be keeping track of questions as we run through the afternoon. We will get through as many as we can at the end of the discussion, but what Joel will do is look at the key themes that are emerging from those questions to try and group them into the key areas of interest if we don't have time to get through them all, but we will get through as many as we possibly can. So the Q&A will be at the end of the discussion. So before we do wider introductions, I'm going to hand over to Jonathan Atkinson at Carbon Co-op, who's just going to give a high-level overview of what we're going to be hearing about. So, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I'm Jonathan. I'm the retrofit team lead here at Carbon Co-op, and I've been involved in the project quite a high level at bringing the programme together and kind of putting in place different elements of the partnership. Just to contextualise things very quickly, because I know I don't want me for ages, but Carbon Co-op, we're a community energy organisation based in Greater Manchester, and we exist to help people and communities tackle climate change in their homes and in those communities. And we've got a number of kind of ends or aims or mission that we exist to address around energy justice and around like equity around the energy system and the energy transition, around collective approaches to tackling that energy transition. So it's not all individualized, and to kind of achieve high quality, deep retrofit and at scale. And we've done a number of different projects over the years where we've been in the driving seat. So we've done works where householders have commissioned us, we've developed schemes, we've put funding in place, and indeed procured contractors and that sort of thing. And we learned a hell of a lot from that kind of thing, but it was often quite individualized. So working with individual householders one at a time, super bespoke, you know, all to their needs. We'll talk a little bit about the finances, but kind of triggered by some grant funding we had to give out to people in fuel poverty. We were looking at different ways that we could affect change and meet those kind of missions, collective action, energy justice and retrofit at scale. And we talked about things like, well, this is a while ago, gas boilers at scale and all this sort of thing. But actually what we thought was, well, we've learned a hell of a lot from the deep retrofit approach. And there are also models out there of aggregated or group works to improve areas, which were more around regen, just improving an area, roofs and lofts and this sort of thing. And we thought, could we bring those things together? Could we bring a retrofit scheme that worked like a group works approach? And that's what we've done. So effectively, Carbon Co-op in this scheme is acting as an intermediary. And really we're aggregating lots of things. We're aggregating demand from householders. So working with a number of householders together in a group works contract. We're then aggregating engagement and like mapping in effect as well to find the right kind of areas. Design, a high level around typologies and types of buildings and energy modeling, and then at a more kind of granular level through design development and architectural details. We're also aggregating finance And you'll hear a bit about that, as I said, as we go, a blended approach to finance, making that available to those householders. And then we're aggregating procurement as well. So again, procuring a single contractor on behalf of a group of householders. We think it's a super interesting approach. It's quite novel. There's a lot of interest in the area. There's a lot of interest in area-based approaches or place-based approaches, and this model kind of fits within that kind of framing. And we think there's loads of learning. As like Jennifer says, we're on site at the moment, so now's an ideal time to kind of be disseminating the knowledge and the learning and talking to more people about what we're doing. And we're really up for advocating for more people to take on these kind of approaches in their areas, in their communities.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I've certainly been very struck by the extent of collaboration here, and I'm sure that will come out more as we have a conversation this afternoon. Thank you, Jonathan. To keep life easier, let's continue with the rest of the Carbon Co-op colleagues. Anika, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so my name's Anika. I'm the Citizen and Community Engagement Lead at Carbon Co-op. In this project, I've been the Resident Liaison Officer, working closely with the householders involved. But more widely in Carbon Co-op, I do a lot of work around people-centred approaches to retrofit. We're doing one project where we're working with social housing providers and supporting them to understand how to take people-centred approaches. And the work that I've been doing on that in the past has really fed into how we're looking at engagement in this scheme in terms of really centering the householders' needs.
Thank you. And I know Helen is also on the call from Carbon Co-op, who's kindly supporting quite a few of the technical aspects. Helen, did you want to quickly say hello?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, hi everyone. So I work with Jonathan and Anika in the retrofit team. We do a lot of particular around evaluating retrofits, so looking at the numbers and also the other aspects of it. But yeah, I'm just sitting mostly in the background on this one.
Thank you, Helen. Helen's kindly supporting the webinar and isn't one of the panelists, but thank you for saying hello. Michael, you're next on my screen. So Michael at B4Box.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Really good to be here because I'm from B4Box and we're the lucky contractor that has been able to work with colleagues to deliver the works. We're currently on site, but it's been a couple of years to get to this point as well. And it's been a collaborative process through that journey. So I'm really happy to be able to share our insights on that journey today. A little bit about B4Box. We, as well as doing construction works, we are also an accredited training provider and we have a social purpose. So the majority of people that we employ and we train come from disadvantaged priority groups. So we're all about trying to bring people, new talent into the construction industry, recognizing the skill shortage that exists and the opportunities that will exist in the future around retrofit and the green economy, and trying to match people that really want to take advantage of those opportunities with a pathway that they can do it.
Right. Thank you, Michael. And there's already some really interesting information about the training model that's been adopted through this scheme, which we can signpost people to after the event. And Hannah and Julie at Progress in Practice.
Hi, thank you so much for having us on. So my name's Hannah Dixon from Progress in Practice. I'm the founder of this small studio that specialises in basically low energy projects such as this one, so deep whole house retrofits and passive house projects generally. And we're really we're really excited to be involved in the project because it has that people-centered approach that we think is really important in all in all design, but also particularly in scaling up retrofit. So we've been involved in the project since I think March 23, and we've kind of overseen the planning and the design development and then the technical design of the project. So I was involved more heavily towards the kind of earlier stages of the project, and now Julie McCulloch here, your introduction, I'm sure, has then taken over the project once it's got on site. So we're at that point where things are really kind of happening in a fairly big way.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Julie Maxwell. I'm an architect. I joined Progress in Practice late April, so not too long ago. And right from the start, I kind of took on Lev project, basically from we were like at the end of the technical design at that time and kind of getting the contract together. And I am now the contract administrator, and then I should go to site and inspect the work and work with Before-Box and Carbon Co-op and the householder to complete the project. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for being here. And we've also got Joel, my colleague from Harlow Consulting, on the call. And I won't put you on the spot, Joel, to introduce yourself. I think you want to be in the background, but thank you for supporting. So moving to our first question then, I'd like to start by talking about the financing model. So the financing model for this scheme has had a number of partners, and like most things around this scheme as a whole, has been very, very collaborative. So Jonathan, I'm going to come to you first. Could you please just explain how this has worked, and just explain it to us, I suppose, where this first stemmed from?
Yeah, and I think as I kind of talk about it, I think it's good to have two things in people's mind, and that is like what you might call the revenue costs of the project and the capital costs of the project. So the revenue costs are basically the setup and startup of the project from our project team. We talked about introduced today, project management, Catherine, as well, and then like the capital costs, which is like the cost of the works, and those two things have been dealt with slightly differently, and also for like scaling and replication would be dealt with slightly differently in the future as well. I'll focus firstly on the capital cost because that's kind of where people's interest is, and also like some of the innovation, I would say, is coming from that kind of thing. So I think the context here is blended finance. For an area-based scheme where you work with multiple householders, there's different householders, different particularities, different circumstances, different needs, different ambitions as well from the project, notwithstanding the fact we're trying to create standardized approaches to retrofit. There are still kind of differences there. Having a blended approach is super important because it offers that flexibility. I'd also say if you're narrowly funding orientated, you'll have certain criteria that tend to be inflexible, so won't lend themselves to an area-based approach where you may be trying to hit multi-tenure and other things. So the three elements of that are grant funding, loan finance to householders, and householders' own contributions themselves, money they put in themselves. And the grant bit is kind of interesting because that kind of triggered our interest in the scheme, triggered our kind of project. So as I kind of hinted at, we'd done a previous scheme where the Department of Energy and Climate Change, as it was, gifted us a pot of money, nearly £400,000, that we then lent out to householders, owner-occupiers, at 0% interest, so a great deal, over 20 years, to help finance the deep retrofit project that we did 10 years ago now. That money then is being repaid to us. Now, in one scenario, you might say that's a revolving loan fund. You get the money back, you lend it out again, and it keeps going, although depreciating because it's 0% interest. But the Department of Energy and Climate Change, when they gifted us that money, said, no, the restriction is once it's paid back, you have to give it to people in fuel poverty as grant. So that means not at the moment, but over time we'll accumulate that £400,000 back again. And we're about halfway through, so we're approaching kind of £200,000. So we've got that chunk of money. Now there were restrictions around that, around people in fuel poverty, although there was a lack of kind of direction from DEC about what that meant. But that's what we've been doing, is saying, right, in a scheme like this, those that qualify and tick the boxes, we can give grant funding for them. There's two fully funded, grant funded projects on here. We've also looked at the scheme as a whole and looked at EcoFlex kind of criteria and said, well, we'll use that as a bit of a guide to say we'll give grant for elements of the different other houses on this project to subsidise kind of works in different areas. So there's a grant funding there. And I think it's a real kind of enabler for the wider scheme. Because I think a wholly financed by the householder, whether it's loans or their own money, that's going to be challenging. So grant helps. So the second element is loans. And there are many and various different options for loans out there at the moment, like social enterprise loans. You've got people like Lendology, for example, CDFIs offering loans relatively cheap, let's say, but still within the kind of market of lending out there. Credit unions we're working with quite a lot at the moment is another option. On this particular scheme, in the early stages when we were focusing where to do it, looking at Manchester, we talked to Manchester City Council. Obviously, we were interested in them partnering with us and like helping us recruit people, helping us focus in certain areas, like offering a bit of a badge to it. What they said, like a local authority officer there, Ian Runnikers, said, well, we used to do group works loan. We used to do group work schemes here. And when there was like when we were doing a street or a terrace of like housing provider owned houses, and there was one or two right to buys, we would offer them a group works lending loan, a group works loan rather, product. And that would enable them to participate in the scheme. And it would mean that you, rather than like re-roofing a terrace and then missing out two, you could do the whole thing, economies of scale, cheaper for the household, better for the environment, better for the kind of visual environment as well. And we were like, that sounds amazing. And so the details of that is that local authorities have historically been able to lend, you know, they still can lend. And in this case, the local authorities would designate an area, and they would say within this area make eligible this lending facility, 0% interest, a charge on the house, so registered with land registry. No, it doesn't accrue interest, and only needs to be repaid on change of ownership. So that's basically the sale of the house, or you know, someone passes away and passes on the house. You know, it's a fantastic deal for the householder, and it's a great enabler. Again, you know, talk about enablers that fits really nicely. It's very place based. I won't speak on behalf of the local authority, but my understanding is the fact that it's a charge on the house means that it sits on an asset as an asset on their balance sheet. It's not like revenue funding or lending where they, you know, that's like part of the day-to-day budgets, which are super constrained. From a local authority point of view, it means that they can lend out from reserves, and it's secured, you know. So we're super positive about that approach, and we're also now talking to one or two other local authorities who are interested in replicating that approach. Helen, who's on the call, has done a really nice kind of bar graph breakdown of the different houses. So it's super interesting that like almost, I think it's 2 houses 100% grant funded, and the others it's all like the bars has different heights, because it is personal. Their kind of requirements for borrowing or putting in their own money, it is all like personal to their project. As I said, it's commonality around common measures, a single contractor, but some of them have slightly less enabling works. Some of them have chosen to do some home improvement as part of this scheme as well. So they're then putting in a little bit more money to do that. But yeah, those kind of grant approaches and the kind of lending approaches are great. And the ambition, obviously, for putting that together is to just lower the cost of that finance as much as possible, make it as available as possible, and particularly on the grant side of things, is to try and create as much flexibility as possible around like criteria, because us and others on this call have worked on other schemes like Eco Scheme or SHDF or other public schemes where the criteria really kills them, because you're trying to create a kind of finance opportunity for multiple people to come into and make it inclusive as possible. And the criteria of the schemes just acts exactly the opposite. It's like, you can't have this, you've got to tick this box. No, we can't pay for enabling works. You know, it just creates too many barriers. From a policymaker point of view, and if there are any policymakers on the call or listening to this, it's like, we really could do with like more flexibility in grant schemes. We've got to work with people like Brenda Bowman in this kind of field, who's always advocated like, you know, as soon as you start a scheme with criteria, you're cutting people out, you know, and you're reducing the impact of those and the sustainability of those schemes. So flexibility, I understand public money has to be spent. There's like an obligation to not waste that money. But yeah, having flexibility around it and enabling schemes like this area-based approach, you know, that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. That's a really comprehensive answer, and I think there's quite a few points there I think people will be really interested in. And you touched on quite a few, I suppose, critical success factors of how this has worked. And obviously you pointed to the importance of flexibility. The money is not elastic, and obviously we're missing the budget. So thank you everyone for missing the budget to join us here today, because no doubt there'll be more news on how local authorities will be able to spend their budgets, and they will be no doubt constrained. So they do need to be spent in the right way to maximise those opportunities to get the retrofit that we need. I'm going to go over to Hannah and Julie, just interested in your experience of the finance models. And Jonathan obviously alluded to other types of schemes that have been financed in different ways, and I'm going to ask Michael the same question in a minute. To say from your perspective, working on this project, how has this affected your ability to deliver? Has this made any difference, in terms of comparing with other things? Are there critical success factors for this finance model that spring to mind for you?
I guess the kind of starting point is to kind of reiterate what Jonathan said about the value of the deal, and the kind of opportunity it offers people. So there's actually, I think the statistics, about 65% of people are owner-occupiers in their homes. So it's a really big chunk of the retrofit work that we need to do is this kind of demographic. So unlocking that is really amazing. I guess in terms of the way that we work, the impact of that is probably a few of the protocols that we've got in place, in terms of just managing sign-offs and making sure that the relationship between Carbon Co-op and householders remains like a really positive, happy one, and that everybody understands what their role is within that. So we've got these certain mechanisms in place, like little happy notes, which sounds frivolous, but actually is really critical to making sure that everybody's on the same page. So I think it's more of a kind of procedural communication thing than anything. But maybe the main point to kind of hone in on that is that there is this kind of agency that the householders have in the scheme that wouldn't be there in a SHDF or whatever type of project. So actually the householders are absolutely integral to the project, and it's been that kind of that process of engaging people all the way through, even now we're on site. So actually having meetings with householders on site, as opposed to just kind of going to site, checking off the list and signing out evaluation, for example, is the long answer.
Yeah, I was going to have the more like practical way. It's like, so we have one contract for the works, but obviously we have 5 householders, so they all have a different budget allocated to the house and different works happening as well. So you kind of have to be keeping track of what budget is for which house, and we have to do payment certificate for each household. So it's not like we don't just do one for everything. It's like a separate kind of budget. So the spreadsheet, and we have worked with Michael on that, and Carbon Co-op, that kind of at some point was a bit complicated. So we try to simplify it so we don't miss out as well the items. They got like VAT on top of them, and some they're excluded from VAT. So it can become quite complex. So I think you need really good spreadsheets and a good method that you follow each time, and be very organized as well to make it a success. Yeah.
That's really useful, yeah, and having researched the VAT space, I understand how complex that can be. So, and similar question for Michael, really, I suppose, from your perspective, and again, having worked on similar schemes as well, whether something or anything stands out to you as a kind of critical success factor for how this has been working here.
Yeah, just to reiterate some of the points already made. Firstly, I do think it's a really brilliant value proposition to the households, as Jonathan and Hannah have alluded to. And there have been some minor details for us to work through. So we issue, for example, different invoices to the different funding basis, really. But in the big scheme of things, that's so minor, because the big beauty for us as a contractor is we've got the collective aggregated demand Jonathan talked about. So instead of having to have the individual relationships with each household, although we've got brilliant working relationships, we've not had to enter into separate contractual agreements with each of them. We have one overarching collaborative contract with Carbon Co-op, and that's brilliant. That saves so much time compared to an alternative of having to have 5 individual contracts and all the separate discussions that would have obviously taken time, and additional transaction costs that would have to be borne by sort of all parties to that. So it's really massively beneficial for us as a contractor in the way that we've been able to develop it collaboratively and then work it. And any of the smaller adjustments we've got to make, whether it's evaluation work or more detailed spreadsheet work, is more than offset by the much bigger overall value from the program.
Brilliant, thank you. And Anika, it'd be really interesting to hear about this from your point of view as the kind of the lead who's been liaising with the householders and hearing about their experience.
Yeah, and I've probably got a few more sort of lessons learned actually. So one thing I would say is that the loan offer from the council is quite complex from a paperwork point of view. So there was a lot that I did in terms of hand holding with the householders to get them through that process over quite a long period of time. It was lucky that the design phase actually lasted as long as it did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to start. If the design phase was shorter, the actual time it took to do the finance was actually quite a long time, because I had to get registered with the land registry as well. So that took its own amount of time, as well as all the legal departments within the council. But I have to praise like the strategic housing team and Manchester City Council. They were absolutely amazing at working with us, really, really collaboratively. I would say it is a really amazing offer, the loan offer, for some. One householder did drop out because it's the kind of offer that works if you're in your home and you know you're going to stay in your home, or you've got a lot of equity in your home. But for those that have bought their house recently, they don't know if they're going to stay in that house for such a long time. It's actually not an amazing offer. And one lesson learned would be, people looking into this, to have a variety of loan offers available that fit people in different kinds of situations to really enable these kind of works on a sort of larger scale. And yeah, what else to say? I think they're the 2 main points. Thank you.
Okay, that's interesting. I know we touched on this before when talking through evidence for the evaluation, that the houses and the householders are kind of same but very different at the same time. So even a house that could look the same from the outside or very similar could have been lived in very differently, and people have so many different needs. So being able to balance those with a finance offer that's going to appeal to a wide range of people has been really interesting. And I think all of you there also touched on the collaboration that we've seen, that seems to be a central thread through everything here. I think most people have also touched on really useful lessons learned. I don't think there's anything else to add from. I'm going to move on to the procurement side of things. Does anyone on the panel have anything else that they want to add about the finance before I move on? Yeah, Anika.
I just have another point. The ability of the grant to support enabling works is really vital. And I would add, it's not just construction-based enabling works, but also particularly working with people who might be on more of a low income or have life challenges, being able to offer enabling work and funds to enable them to engage with the retrofit around other issues like storage or sort of managing clearing spaces, things like that. So I think it's worthwhile people who are coming up with schemes to really make sure that enabling works is available, and there's like quite a lot of flexibility about how those enabling works are used. Enabling funds, sorry.
Interesting, yeah, flexibility again coming through, I think, particularly from the how the finance can be operated. Yeah, thank you. So I want to move on to the contracting piece. So again, you know, very interesting, quite innovative ways have been used to procure works through this scheme. So Jonathan, I'm going to come back to you if you could just again explain how this has worked.
Yeah, and I suppose what I want to do is maybe typify how it hasn't worked, in the sense of we've been involved in construction projects, as I've said, over the years in a number of different ways and in a different context as well. And I think we are super critical about the kind of mainstream approach to procurement in the UK. And I think we've seen some of the consequences of like an overly kind of instrumentalized approach to procurement, where procurement is almost like, well, it is literally totally separate from the aims and objectives that officers are trying to achieve quite often, or elected members, you know. Obviously elected members come and, or, you know, councillors or MPs or whoever, they come and they have like metro mayors, let's say, they have ambitions which are entirely kind of like, you know, really good ambitions basically around job creation, about quality works, about using the publicly procured work that they're doing to create local economic benefit, whether it be training, jobs, sustainability, all that sort of thing. And the way we approach procurement in the UK often takes that and just kind of like rinses it of all that value and hones it down to a minimal kind of product, which is often not what whoever triggered that decision was wanting to achieve, you know. And I do understand local authorities are in a difficult position with regard to, you know, there are laws and regulations and rules around this, but there's also a high degree of risk kind of aversion there. And also, like, you know, again, in their favour is that austerity means that a lot of that tacit knowledge within local authorities has been lost, you know, and the construction expertise or whatever. So it means not only do you get people that are outsourcing procurement to a different organisation, different, you know, totally different from the council sometimes, you might even outsource the procurement exercise to there might be 2 layers of procurement there as well. And there were lots of critiques there around like quality, around the cost of infrastructure in this country, and how things like design and quality are procured out or value engineered out is better phrase, you know, of this. So we have that analysis, and we don't want to repeat the mistakes, and we have been involved through frameworks and other approaches when we've seen the consequences of it. So in approaching this project, you know, we were thinking long and hard about procurement. How would we go about it, and how would we ensure that we weren't put at excessive risk, but we were finding the right partner at the same time? And, you know, we're working in the Manchester and Greater Manchester context, and we're aware of Beaverbox for some time. And Michael and the MD of Beaverbox, Aileen, like, you know, we've been around them and talking, and we realize we have very similar approaches. And what I would say is, and I think this is super important, like similar values. And we're not contractors. We don't have that technical understanding or that construction understanding or supply chain understanding that Michael and his team have. So we're not trying to kind of say, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But we do have the same values, and we want to achieve the same things. And we understand the pitfalls and what have you. We also understand that things aren't always like sunny day and an easy ride. There will be problems, and that we need to come to resolve those collaboratively and together, rather than, as again can happen very commonly, very adversarially within the construction industry. And again, we've experienced that, so can tell you all about it. So what me and Aileen talking, and also Michael and other people in the organisation, we realised we've got a similar approach. We'd like to work together. So rather than go through a competitive tendering process, we went through a negotiated tendering process, which was no less rigorous than a competitive tender, but was completely different, which was around like working with Beaverbox to help them understand what we're trying to achieve, and to basically them to understand vice versa, and input into like design choices and other things as well. Now, we're a community benefit society, not for profit, asset locked. You know, we've got members who are just, you know, people concerned about climate change that want this sort of thing to happen. So we've got obligations there to realise best value, but best value in different terms to what the procurement approach would be. And so we engage with our board there, and we Aileen came and spoke to the board, and there was a negotiated tendering process by which the board was said, yes, we are happy to enter into contract. That was before there was even a price. You know, again, there's like an expectation that we'll work on this together. We'll work on the design package with Hannah and her team. We'll work with B4Box, with Michael and his team, and we'll come to an agreement on price that we know is reasonable and is what the work costs as well. You know, and so yeah, we went through that negotiated tendering process. I think the other innovation is we developed like a kind of JCT minor work style kind of contract, put it in front of Aileen, Michael and their team. So like, well, what are we doing this for? Because together we've come up with, we've negotiated this partnership, and we've been in partnership, and now you're putting quite an adversarial, you know, again, you know, that's the way the construction industry is, an adversarial contract between us, and that's going to change the dynamics in all sorts of different ways. So again, what we did, and working with lawyers that they're actually quite Anthony Collins, who were quite active in the cooperative movement, and B4Box have worked with them. We've worked with them in different contexts before as well, so we know them. So we jointly procured that Anthony Collins, and we wrote a partnering contract there. And the partnering contract starts not with the work, but with the shared values and the shared ambitions around outcomes, around jobs, around environment, around quality. And then there are kind of elements, you know, subsections to that which cover the specific context of this work. But the partnership agreement isn't meant to be project specific. It's meant to be a partnering agreement to say, we'll do this work, and then we'll look at it and we'll learn the lessons from it, what worked, what didn't work, and we'll then look at the next project. And again, we'll do that in a way that's collegiate and collaborative and together. And, you know, I also, having worked in the construction industry for many years, I know there are different models out there of partnering and risk sharing and all this sort of thing. And I know often it's not about the contract, it's about the relationship that the contract describes. You know, that's the important thing. And I really hope that we've learned some of the lessons from things like Grenfell and other things around procurement, around adversarial approaches, around value engineering out design and quality and safety, and that we can actually build on these kind of relationships that are collective and collaborative, because that's really the way that we're going to scale this kind of thing, rather than instrumentalized approaches to procurement which try and kind of automate these things, because ultimately it's about people and about people working together, not about kind of computers that tick all the boxes. I'd really be grateful to hear what Michael thinks about this as well, you know, because again, it is a partnership.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And certainly as somebody who tenders a lot for work, the negotiating tender concept is music to my ears. I would love to see more of that. Certainly less of a computer says no approach. So with Michael, we're going to come straight to you and then back to Hannah and Julie to just think about all of your experiences of how the procurement model has worked here. And I'm conscious that all three of you have worked on quite a few projects of this nature, so maybe able to draw upon different experiences. So it'd be great to hear from your perspective. I'll come to you, Michael, first about, you know, what do you feel's worked really well here? What have been those critical success factors? And is there anything on reflection right now? And I note, obviously, this project is not finished. Anything that you think could have been done differently?
The headline is, I think it's been a brilliant way for us to become involved in the project, and it's emphasised collaboration from day one, from the initial conversations. So the negotiated procedure, it means that as a team we're embedded from the outset, and we're just not coming in when design specifications have been created, and we then maybe are just responsible for just trying to build things on site, and that's it. So we were 2 years involved in collaborative meetings in all sorts of ways, whether it's some initial household engagement, design engagement, thinking about some of the finance elements, and it just meant we were able to help influence and shape some of those earlier discussions, and that builds a team approach from the get-go as well. And obviously we've got continuity with the teams and working on site. They know that we've been involved, and it means there's that culture of we really want to deliver and do our best, because we're a collective team here. So it makes a big difference. And I think some of the concerns that maybe advocates of other procurement methods might raise to do with value for money, I think we can point to the way that our value for money proposition does stack up, because we've taken out some of the costs, some of the risk factors that maybe contractors do need to price in, or the competitive nature of lowest cost bids often draw out particular types of behaviours and results, unfortunately. So it really, I think overall produces a better value for money proposition for the households involved, and obviously the funders who are contributing to the scheme. Some of the examples that I think we can point to as to why the negotiated procedure does lead to sort of better outcomes include our participation, for example, in the design meetings. So our site manager, a couple of different construction managers actually have been involved in some of those design meetings, and we can help give our feedback on deliverability and buildability of different solutions and help to shape that. And I'm sure Hannah and Julie will have some thoughts on that. And it means that when we actually come to do the works, it should be a higher quality standard of works that is delivered, because we're much more familiar with the materials and the methods in advance. We've not just been given a specification and scope of works, go away and deliver that please. We've helped to shape it, so we're familiar with the materials. And within a lot of the working knowledge of retrofit, the design performance gap is something that's been highlighted as being quite a downfall really for the industry. So we really feel, because we're familiar and we've helped shape it, we're in a much better position to get a higher quality build as a result. And that's obviously really important for the households, and that adds to the overall value for money that people will receive from it.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really interesting to hear about it from your side of things, from those different experiences coming together. And again, same questions really for Julie and Hannah, thinking about your experience of being part of this procurement model. You know, what stands out for you as these are the things that have made it work, but also on reflection, is the things that you think that the project could learn from, that, you know, perhaps similar schemes might want to approach in a different way?
So I guess, I mean, there's loads that Michael and Jonathan have just said that I'd like really reiterate in terms of those relationships between contractor and client, and the kind of status quo way of doing things. Really, it doesn't work for the client and it doesn't work for the contractor. So it's kind of it's a problem in both senses. So taking this approach has been really, really positive. Because BFBots, I think, were involved before we were, so you know, it's been the whole process for us has been this kind of collaborative approach, which means that as we've been doing design work, we've actually had input from BFBots both in terms of costs, so actually starting from a very high level and then more and more detailed as we move through the process, which has been obviously invaluable in terms of Carbon Co-op managing the budget, and then also communication with the householders. But then also, as Michael kind of touched on, the technical side of things, making sure that what we're detailing, drawing on a 2D, you know, piece of paper, is practically buildable, achievable, is the best way of possibly achieving that on site. Obviously, there's going to be things we pick up as we go through. But having, I mean, kind of giving a shout out to Pauline, who's, you know, an absolute warrior. She will happily pull apart your detailed drawings, which has been invaluable. So that, you know, going through iterations of drawings and making sure that we've made it as robust as we can before we get onto site has been really, really useful. I guess we took it maybe a step further in that we not only kind of responded to BFBots' input, but then we had a kind of two-way conversation about what it was we were producing. So trying to make the way that we specify products and the way that we communicate to BFBots when it comes to that kind of documentation making sure that's as clear as possible and it's as useful as possible. So not just going away and creating an MBS spec of 200 pages that's just going to be taken, signed, put in a drawer, and then looked at again, but making something maybe a little bit more practical and usable for when it got onto site. So those are things I think I would definitely take forward to the next project, is look at what those outputs were, and maybe probably by the end of this there'll be more lessons that we can add to that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Just, I mean, I don't have too much to add from Hannah, but just saying, like, it's this type of procurement, this type of project kind of give access to the householder to like a much better contractor in sense, like it's unlikely like one household will have gone to P4Box and get them to do the retrofit job, so that the fact that we're doing 5 houses at the same time, we get like a bigger contractor who's got their own people on board, like their same team, they use the same people all the time, they train their people, so that gave them like a really good deal and a very good package that might not have happened without this procurement. And also they got like a big team around them, so it's, I think it's a little bit like stress-free, not stress-free, but less stress for the householders, because we're all there with them, we meet with them, we talk, we kind of resolve the issues, propose options before even they have to come across the problem and things. So we've been really like supporting them a lot. And I think usually in this type of project, you go the client and the builder, and that's it. They might not have a team around them, so they've been like really supported by a big group of people. They care about the project and care about the success of the project as well, which has been really good, I think.
Thank you. It's really interesting to hear that from all of your perspectives, and a lovely segue back to Anika, I think, from the householders' point of view as well, from the way that procurement works. You touched on it there, Julie. Anika, has that been reflective of your experience, how the procurement has enabled this experience for householders?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've protected the householders from a lot of complexity, a lot, and I'm not sure they realise as that we've taken on a lot of that complexity in terms of working out, design, even just knowing who to pick as an architect, knowing who to pick as a contractor. They haven't had to do, and they put a lot of trust in us. But also, I think this way of working is more trustworthy, which is kind of it's sort of worked around like that. And I think this kind of collaborative approach has really shown its value when we've hit tricky problems, that we've been able to work out those problems together, everyone in the team. And yeah, I mean, we're going to do householder evaluations, so it'll be interesting to hear from them whether that level of trust. But the fact that they've stayed with us when the timelines and budgets have gone over what they thought it would at the start, and they've stayed with us over a 2-year period, almost, 2 years now, is probably speaks to some level of trust. And the fact that they signed the contracts with us and we're like, okay, we're going to go with you. I mean, that sort of does demonstrate a lot of trust, which I think this approach creates, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And that also leads us very nicely into the final area of our conversation today before we go to questions, which is around those communications and relationships with the householders. I think you've all talked about this people-centered approach being at the heart of this scheme. So Anika, I'm going to come to you first. If you could talk to us a bit about the processes that have enabled these communications and the relationships with the householders.
So I think a lot of what we've done is about building relationships with householders and with the group as a group, so both as a group and individually with the householders. I think in terms of processes, the fact that as a resident liaison officer, I've been involved in the design team meetings has been a really important part of the process, because it means that the householder's perspective is brought into where all the kind of key decisions are being made in the project. But in terms of how we're interacting with the householders, a big part of it in terms of what's important is sort of treating the householders as equals, explaining what's going on, explaining why there's delays, sort of having that kind of adult to adult relationship, being really open and honest about the programme, explaining why decisions are being made, managing expectations, not always getting that right, doing our best. I think a part of that, treating householders as equals as well, is about kind of explaining some of the more technical aspects of retrofit, and not kind of being And I think Hannah did an amazing job of that. We put together an architect's workshop, and I didn't know what to expect, but Hannah kind of went through like, what is form factor, what are thermal bridges, what does this mean in terms of your homes and the designs we're creating, and gave everyone a chance to understand it, but also ask questions and make amendments to that. I think other parts of it that's been really important is sort of providing preference and choice. I know this is slightly controversial on a bulk scheme because it is challenging, but we've, as much as possible, enabled choice. So simple things like colour of render, which I know a lot of larger schemes wouldn't put time into, but kind of what people care about is aesthetics. That's been really important. But then it's kind of gone down to detail of like type of handle, which I think maybe was, I don't know, it's these things add complexity, and I think that does that challenge. I think it's probably a matter of resourcing that, so that, because that kind of level of choice is what really means that people will be able to engage and will stay with you, especially if people are putting in a lot of their own money, as well as even if people are getting this grant funded. I don't think that's a good argument for not allowing choice, because especially if you want people to rave about your scheme and get someone else to bring in their neighbours, if you do another round, but this is a really good scheme, it's really good quality, then enabling that choice is really important. But it is a reality that adds cost and complexity to every partner, to ourselves, to B4Box, and to PIP. And I really appreciate how they've gone above and beyond to enable those choices. And it has been challenging at times. And I think a learning about that is resourcing that, really. I could talk about all sorts of things, but hopefully that gives some insight into the way that we've tried to make this as people-centered an approach as possible.
It does, thank you. That's really interesting. And as you say, it's this achieving this balance, which I know you've all grappled with throughout this, between what we're looking here to get that scaled up area-based approach, balancing that with individual needs has really been at the heart of everything here. And as you say, that does take a certain amount of time and resource to be invested to achieve that. I'm going to go to Hannah and Julie now, in terms of your experience. And I know Anika alluded there to some of the education side that you've provided for the householders. So it'd be good to hear a bit more about that, and then your kind of broader reflection of how those householder relationships are working. And again, as if there's anything you can see as a key lessons learned, anything you'd think about for future schemes.
Yeah, so I'd say that's something that we kind of we designed a kind of program of workshops right from the beginning. So we were really aware that we were going to be having this this kind of, I guess, education process as part of the process of the project. In reality, there's probably more of that than we anticipated. So I think like future projects would probably think about how we design that a bit more efficiently, having gone through this current process. And I'd say the same probably applies to some of the kind of design choices as well. So it was really important, I think, for us to give people those choices, to give people that way of engaging with the project and feeling like they had control of it, and feeling like that their opinions mattered, and that they were kind of defining the route of their specific project. But at the same time, kind of, I think Anika kind of touched on it a bit there in terms of the complexity of it and managing that and making sure that didn't push up costs, basically. So finding that sweet spot is what we tried to do. I think there's a bit of refining of that to be done, but definitely not taking the whole thing away. And then one of the key lessons that we learned in terms of trying to do some of that communication is that we did do a lot of drawing work and kind of sketching out thermal bridges on a flip chart and all of that stuff. Turns out people don't necessarily can't necessarily visualize what a thermal bridge is when you sketch it on a flip chart. What would be more useful maybe is a photograph of what a trench outside your wall looks like, or a photograph of what you mean by wrapping insulation. So I think kind of adding a bit more, sort of a few more real examples of things to give people more manage expectations more and give people more of a real idea about what the level of disruption they can expect is and what the real practical side of things is going to be like when it gets to site, I think. Yeah, it's also, I mean, because I do meet with the householder like every couple of weeks on site. So it's like they've been on the project for like 2 years and they forget things you might have said early on and all the workshop and things like that. So they, they go their lives, they just forget about things. So you feel like you need to keep kind of educating them in a way like you need explain to them what we're doing and what we need to do. And also you need to reiterate that like a key part of this success, like for the retrofit to be a success. So they've got a job to do, they've got a big role as well after we finish the work. So like when we started installing the fans, the ventilation things, quickly, like there was furniture in front of them and things like that. We're like, oh, you can't, if you do that, it's not going to work. But so trying to explain, it's important, the air comes in and out and things like you need to keep that free of furniture. And so they don't fully realize that. So you need to keep like kind of explaining things and like step by step, like it's like breakdown of what's happening and what they need to do and what we're trying to do. So there's a lot of re-explaining what we're doing. And every time, because with all the houses, like one started first and then the other, so you feel like you keep like having the same conversation over and over, but it's really important. And what else I was going to say? I've learned my train of thoughts. that would do. Yeah.
I think that ongoing education piece is really interesting, and I know we've talked about that at some length in our conversations, and the importance of, as you say, it's not just necessarily one piece of communication and leave it there. There is that commitment to be had to make sure that's an ongoing conversation, and I know a huge amount of time has gone into that. So I think that's really interesting, and probably interesting for people to understand how that's worked. Did you want to add to that, Julie?
That was my other thing. Just to say that obviously I came on the project quite late as well, so I didn't have a strong relationship with the householder when they just started and we went on site. So it was really, so we did at a kickoff meeting and we kind of explained, so we had all the householder in the same room together, and we explained that kind of the process of the site meeting and the payment and what was going to happen in a bit more like granular way, which was quite useful. And then what was key to kind of make the process smoother as smooth as possible was so for each household, the first site meeting, we did spend more time with them to talk them through what was happening and the process and what was going to happen in the next site visits and things like that. So we took the time and we gave each householder the same amount of time at the first site visit, and we've kind of reduced that now because it's they know the drill, so it's a bit easier. It was really important to kind of spend that time at the beginning with them, and also build that relationship, me with them and Pauline with them as well at the first site visit.
Interesting. So that investment paid dividends over the longer term.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michael, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of that householder relationship, the engagement, how it's worked from your perspective?
Yeah, so just to go back to the beginning, really. So a benefit of the negotiated procurement process is that we first started to attend and meet households before the households had actually committed to the programme, really, when the wider neighbourhood community were invited to consider becoming participants within the programme. So I think hopefully that really helped from some households' perspective, being able to engage and ask questions of the contractor there and then when they were making their decision. So obviously having that early availability was probably one of the very different aspects in this programme. And then as we moved to delivery on site, we were quite clear in sharing a programme, the intended programme that so far, touch wood, we still managed to continue to deliver against. And then we provide a sort of separate weekly update from the site manager, Pauline, who's obviously doing a brilliant job, just meeting the the individual households having those discussions on the weekend. We provide in writing every fortnight a written sort of plan for the next 2 weeks, the type of work that will be going on, the rooms that will require access to, and the type of potential disruption that will be involved, although obviously we try and minimize that, but it's just providing that clarity to the household so they can plan their lives around the works that are going to be coming down the line. So I think communication has happened just quite naturally, and the feedback we get from the households is they feel confident just calling us anytime if they've got a potential change in their schedule and might not be able to provide access certain days. They just give Pauline a ring and we make it adaptations however we need to.
Great, thank you. I think, again, just echoing the flexibility that has been talked about quite a bit already as well. I'm going to come to Jonathan in a minute just for any final reflections on this point, and then we're going to go to questions. I don't think, Joel, having a quick scan through them, that I think they're all different, so I'll have to probably just work through them and see how many we get through. So, Jonathan, any reflections finally on the householder side before we move to the Q&A?
No, I don't think I can add to what people have said, and I'd be really fascinated to go through the Q&A.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you so much for giving those reflections. And there's a few interesting questions that have popped up, a few things on finance. Joel, do you want to answer the first question, please?
Yeah, so going back, we've got a few questions about financing and particularly the loans element of finance. So one question is there a limit on the finance being loaned, and what levels of finance are people taking up?
Thank you. I think that might be one for you, Jonathan.
Maybe. Yeah, there is a limit. I think we did increase it as well through negotiation with the local authority. I believe it's 32, the loan. No, Anika knows best.
Anika, let's go to me. Thank you, Jonathan.
It's the maximum amount is £35,000. Some people have chosen to take out less. If people use less, they won't. That charge, the charge will just go up to the amount that they've taken for the loan. But I think everyone is maxing that out, aside from one that wanted to keep a lower budget.
Thank you.
And actually, Manchester City Council were really helpful, because initially it was a 20k loan, and then we kind of realised that the costs were going to be higher, and they decided to extend that for us, which was again sort of indicative of how great our relationship with Manchester Council has been.
Thank you.
Now, I'm aware we don't have a council representative on the panel right now, but one question that came in was, does a council need to be cash rich to offer on the Group Works loan, or can they apply to central government for the money?
Yeah, no, they can't. No, I guess cash rich is a bit of a, kind of like it's a relative term, but yeah. I mean, in council terms, this isn't a lot of money, but at the same time, there are councils in severe financial distress. So yeah, and it will slightly depend on that. Having said this, like the ones we're working with at the moment, Oldham and Manchester, they're happy at the moment, but things do change, financial circumstances change. One thing about talking to the government is we should definitely be advocating this as a lending mechanism to the government, because it's localized, it's personalized, it's responsive, and it can genuinely assist local economic development. There are a few agencies such as UK Investment Bank who are interested in this sort of thing. Infrastructure Bank, sorry. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll see a bit of movement. But if we're looking at the United States, where there's a lot of interest with the Inflation Reduction Act in this kind of thing, more generally, they have shown by government investing in the balance sheets of CDFIs and intermediaries, could be municipalities, that's an effective way to create lending, because it's underwriting risk rather than just giving lots of money, so this is essentially more scalable and more effective.
Thank you. Back to you, Joel.
So thinking of that, advocating, do Carbon Co-op have a paper or something written down on the funding arrangement so we could explain it to other local authorities?
We don't have something written down, like, but we could write something down. But we one thing I would say is, like, we're doing quite a lot of dissemination around this with people like the LGA and people like Connected Places Catapult and GMCA and other local authorities. So we're not keeping it to ourselves, that's for sure. And I guess the other thing is, like, it feels like, oh, this is a new thing, it's a very different thing. It's actually something local authorities did quite commonly. There was a greater degree of, often it was called like home improvement loans or home improvement lending and that sort of thing. So these aren't like massively innovative and new mechanisms. They're kind of old tools put to new uses. And I suppose one of the challenges is institutional memory. So with austerity and the financial pressures local authorities are in, what you find is a lot of these people that knew and operated these things have left the local authority. And people like Ian Runnickers, who was like, this would work perfectly, not a problem. He's coming towards the end of his career and now looking to leave. And that institutional memory is super important to preserve and utilize, because we need these kind of municipal lending mechanisms and other mechanisms, locally focused funding and resource mechanisms to fund the energy transition. It won't come, and we've also been involved with banks and building societies and other kind of lenders. Like, it's super challenging for them to lend in this kind of way. And it almost matches the kind of contractors as well. The contractors are more localized. The lending should be more localized and more personalized. So institutional memory is a big one. But yeah, we're happy to write. We can write something, definitely.
Thank you.
Great. Another question about budgets, actually. Were the household budgets fixed? I'm wondering how the negotiations have affected the final works done and the final cost, and also those time costs associated with the involvement of B4Box. It sounds as if considerable time was invested in this process. So were the household budgets fixed?
I think maybe start with you, Anika, on that one.
Yeah, it's been really complicated, actually. And I'd be really interested to hear from Michael and Hannah on this, because we all went through a process last year of there's like a chicken and egg of like the design, a certain amount of design work being done, that being costed by B4Box, us checking that with householders, and then more design work being done. Also, there are changes from the householders coming up, going via Michael, producing another set of costings, going back to the householders, and yeah, it was complicated. The budgets weren't fixed, and most of the householders who are loan householders decided to go above the loan amount and add some additional measures as well. And with the grant funding, we could be flexible with that. So in terms of like meeting the costs to a certain extent, I'd say. But yeah, I'd be interested in what Hannah and Michael would have to say about that process.
Thank you. Michael, I'll come to you first.
Yes, so it was an iterative process, as Anika's emphasised, and from our point of view, along the way, as part of the considerations, for example, some of the key elements we're looking to purchase, say windows and doors, that's about testing the market and going to different potential suppliers and getting the response back in terms of, yes, their cost, but also the energy performance, all the different factors we consider. So then it's the different weightings we have for those different factors, and it's considered around the table, and then all those different elements come back into the big picture about what might be possible for each of the households, depending on their particular budget limit potentially. So that's done it in a very open book, collaborative way, and it's about understanding what's the biggest bang for the buck, really. So I think that's one of the key things to obviously mention. Was there a second part of the follow-up that I could also help with?
It was what about the time costs associated with Beaverbox being involved throughout the process?
Yeah. So thanks for that, Joel. So yeah, there were obviously additional time involvement, and the way I'd look at it from just a simple business development point of view, in order to find work and have productive work to do as an organisation, we have to invest somewhere. And what better place to invest than on a collaborative progress with great aims and objectives for everyone involved, and of great benefit to the household. So if we're attempting to do traditional contracting tendering, then there's an awful lot of time that can go into tenders of which there's perhaps very little chance we might ever be successful, and so you end up spending lots of time and resources in other ways. So we'd much rather spend our time working smarter on a project like this.
Yeah, thank you. And Hannah, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It wasn't the original question, but in terms of, if you think about the amount of energy and cost and resource that goes into tendering projects across the board, if we all put that into working more positively together, that would an amazing thing. I've forgotten the original question. What was the first one?
It was about whether the household budgets were fixed and how the cost might have changed throughout the process.
Yeah, so it was this iterative process of kind of adding a bit more detail to the design, adding a bit more detail to the cost plan, and going on in that fashion. And obviously every time the budget got revised, then there was an amount of work for Anika and her team to kind of do in terms of speaking to the householders and also speaking to Manchester City Council and all of that really complicated stuff behind the scenes. What I think is really interesting is that a lot of the householders have actually, they've bought into it more than what was required. So there were some decisions that were made along the way. So for example, a lot of people have decided to have their front windows done, which was not part of the scheme originally. But it's something that I think a lot of people felt added a lot of value to the project in terms of maybe the value in terms of their property even, but also they'd see the benefit of it. And there were other things where we kind of added quality and value to the project for I guess the organisational peace of mind that this was a really high quality, robust scheme. But I think in terms of the kind of outcome and the householders' satisfaction, it's about that communication and expectation. So as long as they're kind of kept on that journey, they're happy. If there's sudden kind of jumps, obviously people get a bit alarmed and a bit worried about things, but it is that kind of communication, that really important work that Anika's been doing all this way.
Thank you. Back to you, Joel.
So we've got a question specifically for Michael. On the contractor side of things, have there been any efficiencies of scale from adjacent homes, materials, procurement, etc.?
Yes, so there have been some efficiencies. So again, going back to the collective purchasing approach from the households, the 5 households combined means that we are able to order materials in higher quantities. So that does unlock some price reductions from certain suppliers for certain materials. However, I don't think it's necessarily being completely sort of price driven towards that effect. So, for example, Anika's point about the customization, every household was able to make their own choices about fixtures and fittings, color choices, for example, on the render, etc. So I'm sure we could have driven that further if it was just purely commercial bottom line focused, but that wasn't the intention, the values of the project really. So there were some ways that we could unlock some price reductions, but it was by no means the primary sort of driver, if you like.
Thank you. And then
I can
bring Jonathan in there.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think we have to be a little bit minded about like the cost of retrofit in other schemes. Like as I've talked about, there's a tendency within procurement to drive down costs, like on the contract. But actually, what you'll find is the kind of oppositional approach to construction means that there's like cost is clawed back later in different ways that might be like on the contract through claims, or maybe on the specification through kind of contracts coming, actually, you know, things have changed, can't deliver this specification, or can't deliver, or quite often, as I think Aileen and Michael talk about, we can't deliver that training output that we said we would, but that doesn't matter, does it? You know, and so there's like, what is the real cost of retrofit? The other thing is the stuff that Anika's talk about, which is like genuine engagement and involvement, not just around like choices of colours, but also like listening to needs and, you know, and dealing with different circumstances. That costs as well, and that is taken out of the standard, you know, procurement approach. And as we're finding through the work we're doing, like, it's just not costed, and it just doesn't happen. So like retrofit costs a certain amount of money, and we need to be upfront about that. And we'd prefer to do a scheme, like Michael says, is that cost discussion wasn't mediated primarily around driving down the cost. It was like, what is it worth? You know, what's it worth to you? What's it worth to us? What are the quality considerations? So I think I understand why certain policymakers are focused on price, but we need to be realistic about what it costs and what is omitted from the price when we drive down costs.
Thank you. And Anika, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just to add that obviously we're working with some people who are on low incomes and face life challenges. Obviously the part of the grant funding was people in fuel poverty, and to genuinely work with people and ensure that they don't drop out because it's too complicated, it's too difficult, you have to put extra resources and time in to build that trust, goodwill, and also additional support to support them to get through the process. And retrofit's so incredibly disruptive and challenging for anyone, and so obviously if people have like less ability to cope with challenging things, it's going to be really hard. But if your value system is one of energy justice and that you don't want to leave anyone behind, then you've got to put in the resource to do that work. And I think that's a decision we made, that we wanted to be able to do that, so we've enabled the time to do that.
Thank you. And we've got a bit that we probably get through a few more. There was one question I was quite interested in the answer to, which was to Anika's point about the difficulty for householders who may be moving on soon, what finance product would work. So I don't know if that's something you've come across already, Anika. Were there any suggestions coming through on that?
So I don't know lots about this, but I did look into different finance offices through a different part of work, and there was something called the property linked finance. I think it's where you can take a loan. I don't think it's available yet. I think it's something the Green Finance Institute was investigating. And I believe it's something like a householder would take out a loan to do retrofit works. That loan would get passed on to the next householder if they sold it, something like that. So I think it's about being innovative around funding approaches and linking funding approaches to people's different situations. You know, we've in the past come up with this sort of retrofit personas idea. So it's kind of like a retrofit personas with funding added into that, and maybe someone is already doing this, investigating the different kind of routes for people in different situations.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's obviously a huge amount of interest in retrofit because of the need to do this and to do it well. I think you've all touched on the quality piece as well. This isn't just about banging everything out as quickly as possibly this is about doing a high quality job, and that's obviously really, really powerful.
I also think so there is a Green Homes Finance Accelerator program, and Carbon Corp are participating in that in a project with the credit union movement in the UK, and I think there's lots of learning from that. One bit of learning I'd like to throw in is that we went to Ireland to look at the credit union sector there, and there are people there who prefer to take a loan out from a credit union than participate in a government scheme with grant for lots of different reasons. So that's like they prefer to pay for their money rather than get free money. And it's down to trust and understanding about who the people are that are lending them the money and the motivations, and whether they might end up paying more on a government grant scheme than they would if they went their own way. And so I think there's a lot of, like, we've localized and this project, and we've created a scheme where the values and intentions of the people involved are, you know, similar, cooperative, locally based, sustainability driven. A credit union matches that in the profile of like motivations and values. You know, there's a higher cost of borrowing from a credit union, but that could be underwritten by government. So there are options there, you know. Yeah, and I think you're right. It's about personalised approaches and what people feel comfortable with.
Interesting. Thank you. Back to you, Joel. I think we might have time to squeeze in a couple more.
So we've got a couple of questions about quality. One about standards. Are you using Trustmark/PAS 2035? Hopefully that's an easy one.
Michael, can I come to you?
No, we're not. We've got quality processes, quality management systems in place, but no, it's not going through PAS.
Yeah. And then sort of linked to that, about the quality and trust point, do you think this approach gives householders confidence that they will get quality retrofit instead of something that costs a lot but doesn't work?
Jonathan, I can see you nodding.
Yeah. I mean, just on the last question, it sounded like a simple question, but it's actually a really complicated question about PAS, like the PAS 2035. There are lots of ways in which our processes harmonise with PAS 2035, and we use like full SAP modelling, energy modelling to inform this. We've got on-site visits, like we've got a designer involved. You know, there are all sorts of different things. There are challenges with the implementation of PAS 2035, and also there are kind of unintended consequences, and kind of it's not really designed for a program like this, I would say, in general. You know, I can see we're advocates of PAS 2035, and my colleague sits on and I think Anika has sat on the retrofit standards group task force, which kind of is like sponsoring PAS 2035. But there are also challenges with its implementation. So a good thing, but not necessarily perfect. What was the other question? Sorry.
It was
the actual question.
Do you think this approach gives householders confidence that they will get quality retrofit instead of something that costs a lot but doesn't work?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to that PAS thing. Is like, and I can see, and again, I'm not dissing PAS. PAS 2035 is there to support quality retrofit at scale, you know, but ultimately it comes down to relationships, and like the relationships you have with your provider, with your contractor, with your designer, and everyone. And I think it's the relationships that this project's built on. And I think it's that, and Anika talked about the fact that people signed on the dotted line for this, and some either put their own money or put loan money, which is essentially their own money, on the line here. So I think that demonstrates a degree of trust. But yeah, it's definitely trust is part of this, and quality. Yeah.
Thank you. Hannah, Julie, did you want to add anything to that point?
I guess only that, to kind of, I'm just repeating what Jonathan's just said, I think, but in terms of methodology, so a lot of the work, the early work that was done by people-powered retrofit kind of followed that same similar protocols as PAS 2035. And then in terms of our, you know, obviously being architects, we qualify as retrofit designers. Julie, you're a retrofit coordinator, so it's recently certified. There are elements of that kind of quality assurance that are involved in the scheme without being necessarily certified. Is that right?
Yeah.
To jump on the quality, I think the how we get from this, like the collaborative approach, the team we have with Carbon Co-op before Box on site, and with Pauline especially on site together, we kind of, you know, they're on board, they know what we're doing, and we share the same goals. So we're dealing with like existing terrace houses, so they're not all in like great shape. But if we do see a hole and we're trying to do a hair tag test, you know, we're not even thinking about it. We're gonna, you know, fill that hole and things like that. So it's a lot of things. You don't have to explain every step, because we know we're on the same page and we're trying to achieve the same thing. So that's been really, really great on this project.
Thank you. We are heading remarkably close to the end of time, so I'm not sure how many let's see if there's one we can just sneak in. Here's a relatively speedy one. Is there a procurement template framework that other local authorities could adopt? I say that's a speedy question. Is there anything like that that is shareable? And I think everyone on the call will probably be very appreciative of the amount of information that's being shared so that others can learn. Jonathan, is there anything?
Yeah, there's stuff online around partnering projects, and also Anthony Collins have a case study on there, which is the BeForBox case study around partnering, and it specifically relates to, well, Michael should talk about this, but their work with Stockport Homes. I don't know, Michael, if you want to quickly reference that.
Yeah, so Stockport Homes, a social housing landlord, and they've done pioneering work to make the Social Value Act real. So it's again collaborative based to the agreement. And Anthony Collins obviously had experience of developing this in other sectors, not just building retrofit as well. So they're a good point of call, and I'm sure all participants in this program will be happy to sort of have further follow-up conversations with other people who are trying to look to do the same thing in their communities.
Thank you very much. So I think we've unfortunately run out of time there to answer any more. There's been some really interesting questions that have come through. So just to let you know, everybody who's attended or signed up will receive a copy of the insights paper that's been developed for this. So hopefully that will help to answer some of the questions we didn't have time for today. And we'll also signpost to some of the blogs that have been written on the Carbon Co-op website about this programme. And I would urge you to keep an eye on that, because more information is going to be shared and more lessons learned from the various organisations participating in this. And I'd just like to thank everybody so much for giving up their time to talk about this today. It's been really, really fascinating to hear how things are progressing for everyone, and I'm sure everyone on the call would obviously echo the thanks for the panel, and thank you everyone who's joined us today. So I will leave it there. Please keep an eye out for further information that comes about this, and it's just want to echo the point I made earlier, which is, you know, really, really great to see this collaboration moving forward, and great to see the commitment to sharing information about this. Obviously, retrofit's such an important topic for our country, so really, really good to see this. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.